Hello, this is Margaret Ajibode, the STEM Positive Disruptor, and today I have a special guest, he's Associate Professor Corey Tutt. He's an Aboriginal from Australia. You know what? I'm not going to talk about it, but the reason why we set up this platform, we want to educate, we want to raise awareness, we want to change perception. And I'm so grateful that Corey's got time to come and have a conversation with me today. And I want to share his journey and what he's doing because he's also the founder and the CEO of Deadly Science. And what he's done is raise money to donate STEM resources to remote schools in Australia, especially for people of Aboriginal background, because again, he'll talk more about that. And so I'm so grateful that he's come on my conversation. So without further ado, welcome, Corey.
Yama Meligan, which means hello friends in my language. I'm a Kamilaroi man, and what I just spoke to you is in Kamilaroi language. Australia has over 250 traditional languages. Our First Peoples, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, we have many, many different nations here in Australia. In fact, you can fit the entirety of Europe in our continent and still not cover all the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations in our country. So we're not one homogeneous group of First Nations people. We're different people of different backgrounds, different belief systems. One thing that is for sure, our people have had a relationship with the land for over 65,000 plus years. We have the oldest recorded culture on Earth. So a lot of our knowledges are recorded verbally and through art.
Okay, thank you. And so what I want you to do is, can you just tell us more what you do? Because you're founder and CEO of Deadly Science, and there was a reason. What was your driver? What was your journey from the beginning? Because I know that part of the things that you wanted to be a zookeeper, but there are lots of things that you felt was not so obvious to you. So why did you feel there was a need to move in this direction?
Yeah, so my father wasn't on the scene from when I was born, so I didn't grow up with my biological dad. I grew up in a really rough area, so probably for the UK listeners, sometimes areas like Bradford have a really bad name for themselves. Very similar to in Australia, where I grew up in a community called Dapto. And for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we have the lowest life expectancy and the highest incarceration rate in Australia, and actually the lowest educational outcomes of any race in Australia. And that is because a lot of our knowledges have been taken. A lot of our people were taken away from their families, and that was the stolen generation. There's a lot of historical abuses in this country, and so that obviously bleeds through to today. And when I was growing up, I really wanted to be like David Attenborough, but I wanted to be the Aboriginal version, And I got to my careers advisor when I was 16, and I'd already been through quite a bit of childhood trauma. And my careers advisor said, stick to a trade or you're probably going to end up in debt or in jail. But I've always been pretty determined to prove people wrong. And I went across the whole continent of Australia as a 16-year-old to work with animals in Western Australia. So just to give you context, I was living in New South Wales at the time as a 16-year-old, and I travelled probably the equivalent of a listener going from London to probably Russia, and that was a really eye-opening experience. I ended up becoming a zookeeper. I left school early, and the challenges that I faced in science, and especially working with animals, was you can't do that. Things were like biases were created based on my race and also my social economic status. And often the images I saw of scientists were of Albert Einstein and Thomas Edison. So that kind of led me throughout my career. I ended up becoming a zookeeper, and I used to feed crocodiles and handle venomous snakes for a living, for a job. And again, I think life, even as a scientist, is full of moments that change your course. And one of the moments for me was losing one of my best mates to suicide. That ended up, I saw an ad in the paper, the newspaper, in the classified. All good stories start with a classified, right? And I ended up becoming an alpaca shearer. So I ended up giving alpacas haircuts and and then cutting their teeth and cutting their toenails. And I went around Australia and New Zealand doing that. And then eventually I became a dog trainer. So I became a behavioralist and started training dogs. And then from there, I worked for the Garvan Institute of Medical Research, where I created mice for medical research using CRISPR-Cas9. And eventually I moved on to the University of Sydney, and after doing a bit of study, and I found that I looked back and I hadn't met another Aboriginal person in the STEM space. And it kind of broke my heart. I often felt lonely because I would try and start initiatives to support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students or culture, and I'd be met with, well, we'll just be supporting you, so we're not going to do that because you're the only one. And comments were made to me in the lab all the time, like you can't drink ethanol, or you can't have the ethanol to wash your hands because Aboriginal people drink petrol, and things like that which were really racist comments. And I kind of got burnt out by the STEM industry because I tried my best to be really innovative and stand out, because being a minority in that group, you're already at a disadvantage because the status quo doesn't want you there. I ended up going down to a local neighborhood called Redfern. It's now a trendy suburb, but there's a lot of Aboriginal people that live in Redfern, and the history of that is because during the Industrial Revolution, it was the only place that Aboriginal people could get jobs in Australia, because it was 1965 that the Australian people had a referendum to vote, to allow Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to vote in this country, and we were considered flora and fauna before that. So that means we weren't even considered human in our own country, and so I went down to Redfern and I used to just yarn with kids. And when I say yarn, I mean not like a ball of yarn, like have a yarn and chat.
Chat, yeah.
Yeah, and it was quite ridiculous. I was volunteering with another charity, and there's a lot of initiatives to get Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids into jobs in Australia and trying to help them. But some of them are very, what we call ticker boxy, and they're there just to tick a box, but they have no substance. Yeah, they have no substance or not authentic. And we know our kids, both non-Indigenous kids and Indigenous kids, they have a really good bullcrap radar. We had a ridiculous scenario where these kids were turning up to this event and getting a drink bottle every week, and they were doing it 10 times a term. So they'd get like 40 drink bottles in a year, and it's like, that's ridiculous. It's a huge waste of money. So I ended up talking about science and getting these young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids really excited about science. And then we started this thing called deadly science. And to describe deadly science, you're not going to die. In Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander slang, it's something we share with the Irish, where words that have a negative connotation in the English language actually have a really positive connotation. So if you think about it as awesome science, that's kind of what, yeah. But then it kind of grew from there. So I went from, I found a school in Central Australia that had 15 books in its entire school. And we call ourselves the lucky country, but we actually have a lot of extreme poverty in Australia. We have communities that don't have educational resources. So I went to Dymocks, which is a local bookshop here in Australia, and I dropped $1,000. And then that one school had another 8 schools, and then it kind of built on from there. And then I'm very stubborn, so I don't really like asking for help. So I ended up getting a second job, and funded it all. And then the second job wasn't enough in the end because the problem was so big. So I set up a GoFundMe page. And then I drew the attention of Professor Brian Cox from CERN. And I started to educate him on Indigenous knowledges and trying to change. If someone's willing to learn and change, the pen is mightier than the sword.
That's true, but it's so true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I always thought that if I could change someone like him and his opinion on Indigenous culture, and it would be truly, it would build the profile of deadly science, and it did. And now today, from that GoFundMe page, I'm the only Aboriginal person in history to win a Eureka Prize. Other organisations have won it for Indigenous programs, but I'm the only individual Aboriginal person that won one,
Wow.
which is really hard to because
Yeah.
I don't have a PhD.
Yeah.
Um, and we've gone from sending books and resources to making them. And we have a team of 16 people now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We employ Aboriginal people and we deliver first knowledges to the curriculum and also in person. So the way I see it, we're there to empower and resource Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander learners because there's no gap in knowledge. There's a gap in resource and a gap in understanding from non-Indigenous Australians. So I
Mhm.
always say we're there to empower black fellas, which is what we say in
Yeah.
Australia,
Okay.
and empower them to STEM and decolonize the lab coat, to make the lab coat. Lab coats are just a bit of PPE. They're not defined by gender. They're not defined by race, sexual orientation. They are simply just a bit of PPE. And STEM is not a white fella thing. It's a human thing. It's observation.
It is indeed. And I think this is why I do like what you've done. I do like your journey. I do like the fact that you saw a need and you had to break down those obstacles because there were people who already being a limit, trying to limit what you're trying to do, or they couldn't see it. And I think what I did like what you said is that you had to convince one person, and that changed the whole dynamics of things. But also, what I do look, I'm just bringing you fast forward because again, I like the idea that you felt you were not going to just give up just because the opportunity was not available. You found a way to break those barriers down. And there's so many people, and I think sometimes the way we look at life itself, we're based on what the media or what is projected to the world, which is not always the right perception. And so I want you to be able to explain to us because you've written a couple of books, haven't you?
Yeah.
And the first one,
Sorry.
yeah, God, sorry, are you okay?
Just start again. Sorry about that. I just had to turn my car on so I have more light.
Oh, okay. I'm just trying to say that it's quite interesting that you saw a need and you had to fight to get to that point. But also, it's about you convinced one person, and because of that change, you were able to bring a transformation to a wider audience, which would not have been possible if you went through the same traditional route of how this is always how we do things. But you changed that, and now you opened wide an opportunity which was not always seen by people, Aboriginals in a sense, because they were not given that opportunity or they even weren't even aware of it. So moving fast forward to the books you've written, because I know the first book you talk about is the scientist, is about, and it's not just the normal scientist in the sense of how it was in the beginning when the first people in Australia took things, and you described. So please tell us more about that.
Yeah, the whole concept of the first scientist was to excite young people about traditional science and First Nation science. We come from the continent whose first people invented bread.
Mm,
That's pretty amazing. We have
mm,
structures in Australia that are 41,000 years old. Fish
wow.
traps.
Mm,
They are man-made structures that teach us about engineering and sustainability.
mm,
We have structures in Australia that have been made with concrete. We
mm,
have huts. We have actually resin as well. So we
mm,
have resin that has been made.
mm,
Our sort of art can last on rock walls for 41,000 years and be
mm,
carbon dated back then.
mm,
Um, there's quite a lot of chemistry and symbiosis and biochemistry, but even in modern times, I don't like using past tense when talking about traditional science because even in modern times, in our lifetime,
mm,
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been employed as bush trackers. So
mm,
if someone goes missing in the bush or there's a fugitive being chased by the police, um, Aboriginal people have been employed to find them because
mm,
the level of observation of the country,
mm,
the skills were so high that they were highly sought after.
mm,
And even famous bushrangers like Ned Kelly,
mm,
who in Australia were apprehended by Aboriginal bush trackers.
Wow.
The Duff kids back in the early 1900s were found. These were a family that went bushwalking in the Grampians, and normally that's a death sentence. But Aboriginal people found them and
Found
saved them.
them. Yeah, yeah,
Despite being massacred by non-Indigenous Australians, they
yeah.
did that. So this book was about celebrating that culture. We also, Aboriginal people saved Australia from invasion from the Japanese during the World War.
Mhm.
Uh, this was about bringing the knowledge into a present tense and making it a real celebration.
In-
And I liken it to, in Australia, we have a company called Harvey Norman.
Okay.
Now, Harvey Norman use all these really sexy ads on TV. They use fireworks, they're very loud, kind of like a Trumpianism, sort of like loud, arrogant sort of advert. And
Mm.
then we have this company called Rivers, and Rivers use this really slow, melodic beat behind the ad. And you notice the Rivers ads because they deliberately put them behind the Harvey Norman ads here in
Mm.
Australia.
Mm.
But for me, the narrative of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the mainstream media is often quite negative.
Mm.
So the whole point was to make it overwhelmingly positive, to stand out like the Rivers ad.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, and I think this is why I want to celebrate you, Corey, because what you're doing, because okay, the thing is, people are driven by what they hear or what they perceive to be real. As we talk about, the reality of things is not always that. And I do like the fact that you did the first scientist. The first scientist is to show that, hold on a minute, this was only taking place before the invasion or whatever how you want
Yep.
to use it. But it's also about celebrating, raising awareness of what was already happening, about people of the first people in Australia were doing and changing that. And what you have done is raise that profile. And that's why I'm so proud of you. I really am so pleased that not because you've done so much. I'm celebrating because even that you're taking notice of that. They made you do what's it, the young person of the year in Australia, isn't it? You've achieved so much, and people are connecting with you not because it's tokenism. It's about because of what you're doing. You're doing positive work. You're bringing changes. You're also making sure that you talked about one voice. Everyone has a right to education. Everyone has a right to be heard. And I think that's so important. That's why we do this. We set up this platform. We want to educate. We want to raise awareness. We want to change perception. And that's why I'm so grateful that you've come on. And you talking like this, it just makes me so happy and so giddy in so many ways, because you're changing perception. You're educating that, hold on a minute, just because society or the media is saying this, come into my world. I will show you a different way, show a different light to what the truth as it is. And that's what you're doing. And also, I like the fact that, you saw that the opportunities that were given to the wider audience was not given to certain people because of whether they feel, oh, they don't need it because this is what we expect them to do with it, which is wrong. Which is, again, that's why, again, I want to celebrate you changing that perception. And I do like the new book you've written as well, which was published last year, about the Black experience of celebrating what you've done. And so
Yeah.
please tell us more about that as well.
Yeah, look, I kind of consider it an emo album, right? Because I all those accolades, that I don't do this thing for the accolades. I don't do this thing for awards. I do this because it's the right thing to do. And I bring people along with me because many hands make light work, and we can change the world as a community.
Exactly.
And at the time of writing this, I was a bit of a rugby union player here in Australia, and
Okay.
I punctured my lung actually playing rugby, and then from there I had a number of sort of challenges with the pandemic and COVID, and I just drew inspiration from other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that were going through similar experiences in other categories. And for me, I had a conversation with an elder that passed away that was in the book. His name was Uncle Archie Roach, and he was a singer. And he wrote a very famous song about the children being taken away in Australia. And I just I sat with him and I talked to him, and then I talked to another elder who passed away in the book as well. And they recounted their lives to me, and the pain and the hurt, but there was a sense of calmness that they had. And for a long time I kind of resented the book, because when it got published, these elders had died. They were I was very close to both of them. And as Aboriginal people, we are very close to our elders, and our knowledge holders. And my wife had a miscarriage at the time, and during the book launch, so I missed the book launch of this book, and it just was associated with all this pain. And I tried to be a recycle bot and recycle all the energy of being swept up in mainstream society, and being celebrated, because as a minority, you're not used to being celebrated, and that comes with an emotional energy, right? But then I learned to love the book again, and the reason why I learned to love the book again was I volunteer for a charity here in Australia called the Starlight Children's Foundation, and they work with sick children that are dying of cancer, and I really I try to go into hospitals and give kids a positive science experience, whether it's talking about animals or First Nation science, or just doing a silly experiment like making a lava lamp, a Barocca and a bit of food coloring and some olive oil. Because most of the STEM experiences these kids have is so negative, right? So I volunteer in hospitals all the time, and I work with a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids. And this Aboriginal girl came up to me, and unfortunately she was passing away of leukemia, and she had this book in her hand. And there's this page in the back of the book, and Kathy Freeman is a huge icon in Australia.
Yes, I do know. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. I remember watching her. Yeah, run. Yes, in athletics. Yeah.
I interviewed Kathy for the book, and she's in the book. And there's this page on the last page of that book, and you can put a kid's photo in there, and you can write why they're deadly. And this kid had this message from this captain of the hospital, which is the captains of the support workers, and I just broke down, because like this child who was going through this really shit thing, like this, I'm sorry for swearing, but leukemia sucks.
It does suck.
It robs people of life, but this kid was just so bright and so positive, even though she knew she was gonna die, and she was so proud that she was in this book. So it made me fall in love with the book again, and
Do you know, I think, see what you're doing in me. I do love what you said, that it was hard for you to celebrate what you've done or achieved, because you're not used to being acknowledged for what you've done. But you know what do I do? Seriously, your passion comes out, your drive, it's not driven because of self, it's driven for there's a bigger picture. And all the things you've done has been deliberate, in the sense that it's not about you. You want to change the perception of things and how it's been done for so long. And that's why, seriously, I'm just celebrating. I'm so grateful that you came on, because you are such a powerful, very powerful, amazing guy. I seriously, you're just one of those people that people always remember, because you changed. You were alone. You were in a way a grain among so many other grains that had to stand out in a crowd, because if you didn't push the way you did, the things would still be the same. But you're changing people's perception. You're educating all the time, and you're raising awareness. And it's not with bitterness or anger. Yes, of course, anger is there, but it's not. It's been translated in a productive way, and it's opening people's perception, and say, hold a minute. Do you know, if I didn't know that, because society doesn't always tell us the truth. They tell us the truth according to how they see it, or whoever's writing that caption itself. So I really just want to celebrate you. I just, I want to say, oh no, I want to know you, Corey, but I'm so grateful that even though you were going through those situations when the book was about to be launched, there was something that was driving you, and it was even to keep the legacy of those two elders that passed on, but also that young girl as well, but also your situation with your family. There was a purpose for why you're here. The reason is, what I'm saying is that you're fulfilling your purpose on this earth by what you're doing. You may not realize that this is basically your direction for life, and this is what you're showcasing right now. And you're using science. The fact that you raised awareness, you raised donation for resources, STEM resources to be provided for remote schools remote schools in remote areas for Aboriginals, because they don't have the opportunity that maybe the Joe Blog of this world would have. And the fact that I love the fact that you said deadly science is not as the negative. It's actually an awesome experience. Come and talk, the way you express, because again, if you didn't explain that to me, I'd think, okay, how do I explain it? But knowing that is makes such a huge difference. And that's why, Corey, I am celebrating you. I really am. And I'm going to watch out for you, because you've got so much more to do. There's so much more, because this is your destiny. This is why you've been placed on this, I believe. I'm prophesying on you, right? But I do believe that's why you've been placed on this earth, for this reason, for what you're doing. And there's great opportunity, and then not just in Australia, but I believe a global impact you're going to have because of who you are and because of what you're driven based on the bigger picture. It's not self-driven, it's for the bigger, it's the change, the bigger perception of the first people of Australia. So you know what? I want to thank you. I want to celebrate you. I want to appreciate you. I just want to, just clap for you. So before we go, what would you say? Because again, there's so many people who went through where their history was silenced, and young people that are growing up. Because again, it's not just about people of certain ethnicity. It's actually across the world. Because if we teach one, we teach everyone. Does that make sense? It's a human thing, and we want to change that perception. Young people are coming up. They're not always given the right information. So the information they step on is not always the perfect one. But if you want to change it, what would you say? What would be one statement that you made?
I would say that to all young people out there, the only thing that's gotten cheaper in your lifetime is information. It's gotten so much cheaper, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's the correct information.
Exactly.
It also doesn't mean what's become more expensive is critique of that information. So what I would say to young people, there's there's 3 ingredients you need in life. First one's be a good person first. Be a good person first, and then you need to find passion and purpose. And you're going to go through potholes along the way. You're going to hit speed bumps. You're going to have to do a couple of U-turns in life. But if you stick to those 3 things, everything's going to be okay. And don't be afraid to be bold. So Deadly Science, when I started it, no one told me it would work. I had professors laugh me out of the room and say I wasn't qualified to work with young people. But then through time and through perseverance, Deadly Science ended up on a McLaren Formula One car. First ever indigenous organisation in the world to ever feature on a F1 car. And we didn't pay for that sponsorship. We got it off a partner. But still to this day, the Australian government won't back Deadly Science because they would rather back non-Indigenous people working in the space, and that's fine. But what we've got to do as a group, we've got to change the status quo. We've got to change the perceptions, and we're slowly doing that over time. I think that in my lifetime, relationships with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have improved out of sight. When I was young, my grandfather, who I really admired and looked up to, people would walk across the street to avoid him. They would call him every name under the sun. They would spit on him. They treated him like, and I remember this in my lifetime. Now I'm being invited to speak at places like Oxford and Stanford and University of Sydney. Like my life I'm doing things that my grandfather never got the opportunity to do because he was considered flora and fauna. He's considered an animal, and he's human. He was a human.
Of course, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's what I'm saying. I do love I do. Seriously, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so grateful to that you're using your platform to spread awareness, to raise awareness. You're using your platform to educate, and the fact that new doors are opening for you. You also said something about it's not just about me. I want to bring others along with me, and I think that it's so obvious in your speech, in your passion, the hunger of wanting to change more. And I think you, as you said, even now that things are changing, you can see change is happening, although it's slow, but it's still happening. And so that's why I'm so grateful that you are who you are. Keep doing what you're doing because you're awesome, guys, seriously. And this is why we in my conversation is celebrating you today. So I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And if anyone in the UK wants to check out Deadly Science, we've got our Instagram page. I've got an Instagram page, but also my books are online. And yeah, thank you for having me on your podcast. It's an absolute honor. I don't get to do much international stuff, so this means a lot to me. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Please, again, if you like this conversation, please subscribe, but also check out his books, but also check out Deadly Science. They have a link. I will put all of that for you. So please share with him, spread the word about what Corey is doing in Australia, and please let's celebrate and bring him to new heights as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Take care.